Hi everybody, it's David from workskunkTV. And today we're going to tell the story of the world's family offices. What are family offices? They are there to manage the investments, in some cases the lives, the philanthropic interest of wealthy families throughout the world. And they tend to be very private, and they don't go out of their way to draw attention to themselves unless there's value in drawing attention to themselves. They have an enormous impact on our culture. There are over 7,300 family offices around the world. And yes, Warren Buffett of Berkshire Hathaway is one of the most famous. In most cases, there must be about 250 million to even justify the cost and the effort of putting together a great family office. In our country, we have about 3,000 of these offices and collective assets of somewhere between $1 and $1.2 trillion. This is big money. And where does it go? It goes into innovation. Family offices tend to be one of the leading sources of investment income for innovation. They tend to be one of the greatest resources with families who are committed, who find meaning in the arts, in real estate development, in shipbuilding, you name it. There's probably a family that's behind it, or several families for that matter. And in family offices today, we can often find interesting cultures that many of our viewers may want to explore as a place to work. I've had one deep personal experience with a family, and her name was Carolina Berry, was the matriarch of a family that came from the original Spanish landlords of California. They owned vast amounts of land, and her family gave the Veterans Affairs of Los Angeles one of the biggest parcels of land ever. And in the deed, it read that the VA was to use this land exclusively for taking care of veterans, including housing them, providing meals, and taking care of all their medical needs. Years later, we had veterans sleeping in alleys across the West Side. We had veterans panning for any kind of money they could get. And the Veterans Affairs Administration was leasing big portions of that land out to commercial interest, even a rent-a-car agency. And Carolina stepped forward and she began a campaign to get the Veterans Administration to honor the deed. It took years. It took great expenses. It took all kinds of heartbreaking moments where she was told that it was over, that they couldn't really do anything that would lead to success. But she did get to success. Not long before she passed away, here is a video of what she had to say about the experience. And not long after that, she got word that they were making a settlement that would actually improve on the request that they had in the original deed.
My great-great-aunt and Senator John Jones decided they would donate this land, which was close to the ocean and very healing. They donated at first 300 acres, and then they traded a coroner for another 300 acres. In 1922, they served 4,000 hot meals a day. They had 3 classes of veterans, those who were completely disabled, those who were partially disabled, and those who were not disabled. We want it to be a home again for veterans, so they could come. You don't have to live there, so you can come and have a meal there.
So what kind of people work with family offices and wealth management? Well, there is a very specific series of industries that are specialized in servicing this market, and we're about to meet one of the leaders, one of the most visible people in family office support, wealth management, is Linda Mack. And about 15 years ago, a mutual friend introduced us, and we've worked together ever since. Linda is one of those individuals that found her way into her current profession by mastering a series of jobs. And when she ran into the end of her potential with a job, she tended to move in the next level up into something else, but it was all related to families. She worked in banking with wealth. She worked in wealth management with families. And then she went to work for a recruitment firm where she served the family office market. And a few years later, she left the firm because she was experiencing pain by not being able to apply her standards of how business was conducted. And so when we met, I met someone who was so exacting and clear and passionate about how she takes care of her clients. It's really been a memorable experience. Linda, welcome to the show.
So thanks, David, and a pleasure to be with you today. So I grew up in Chicago. I grew up in a multi-generational family business. We were in the car business, Cadillac specifically. It was Mack Cadillac, but started by my grandfather in the 20s, and then my father built it quite a bit from there. My brother was then in the business of short term before going into his own business, which he has built very successfully. So I'm a product of family business, grew up in it, worked at the business as I was growing up, learned a lot about work ethic, learned a lot about never judging anybody. In 2002, decided to start Mack International. The love of working with families continued, and I really wanted to build a business where we would focus on specializing in that type of work. So for the last 20 years, we have grown as an independent boutique firm. The objective has been to become the most specialized firm serving families.
Of course, Linda Mack recognized Carolina Berry's name, and she thought of many other people that have brought morality to how their money is used. That represents wealth without accusations of corruption. Is hard to find these days, but we do find it when we look.
I would say that I consider it a privilege to work with the families I work with. They have all, their work ethic, their values, their integrity, and so forth are extraordinary. They have built, I generally call it, they didn't have a lot of liquidity. At some point in their lifetime, they may sell a business, or the business that they've been building for 50 years may start to make a lot of money, and they have a liquid portfolio to invest or be philanthropic around. But it's not like anybody handed them anything. They worked hard and they built it. And I respect that. They also provided jobs. And I think when you look at downturns in the economy, generally, from my perspective, it's the private business enterprise who hang on to their employees. They also care about the communities within which they work, and they're very generous and philanthropic in their communities.
You specialize in C-level CEOs, CFOs, roles in these organizations. What do you want people who are not C-level candidates to know about the industry and why it could be attractive to them?
I think that I always say in the family office world, there are a handful of characteristics that if you aspire to work in this world, these would probably be characteristics that are part of who you are. Otherwise, you might be happier in a corporate or institutional platform. But we say it's number one, the service heart. When you're working with a family, it's a very personal relationship. It's about them. It's not about you. The people who are most successful in a family office situation, regardless of the role, are the people who what motivates them when they get up in the morning is helping the family accomplish something that's important to them. Going along with that is, some of the organizations are large, many are small. It's a question of insourcing, outsourcing, and so forth. But I mean, we've got billion-dollar clients who have 3 people in the office. It's not a question of the magnitude of the portfolio determines the magnitude of the staff. There's a correlation, but you can outsource a lot of things these days. But I'd say in addition to the service heart, it's the feeling that no job is too small. If it's important to the family, it's important, and it's all hands on deck to get it done. You have to wear many hats. There's no such thing as, it's not my job. So there's a few characteristics there that I would say, I think so those are things that attract people to this. I think it's very exciting work. I think it's work, you can work for someone who, who the principal is. It's not like they're 3 steps removed. They are private. They don't have to answer to maximizing shareholder wealth this quarter, which there's nothing wrong with that, but to be working with a principal who has long-term goals and objectives and is philanthropic and so forth, for a lot of people, they're drawn to it by the fact they want to work for a human being who has these kinds of values.
A few years ago, I had the really wonderful experience of speaking to many of your competitors. And there was a theme that kept coming up over and over again that I've never heard of from other people. And that was they view you as a friend. They appreciate the voice that you bring to your profession in the wealth market. They talked about how you uplift the entire profession at these conferences throughout the world. What inspired you to do that?
Inspired me to start the business was to serve families. And I felt that they could only be served the way I felt they should be served, from a private boutique platform. Beyond that, though, I think it's just, I love what I do. To me, I have a relentless passion to help a family, and we've designed our search process around this, and it's very different than others. But we start with the premise that our families are looking for someone who will be with them for at least the next 10 to 15 years, kind of like your doctor, your lawyer, whatever. You want them there for the long term. It's a very close personal relationship. The second thing is that they obviously need to be qualified to do the job that needs to be done in that 10 to 15 year context as you grow, but they also need to be the right culture fit. And when I say culture fit, it's the personal characteristics and attributes that align them with the family in terms of values and philosophies, communication style, decision-making style, relational style, and so forth. So that's the magic of what we do, and what we love to do is first get to know our family client and help them think about how they've evolved to where they are today and where they're going over the next 10 to 15 years, and then back into defining what would be the role that would enable them to successfully accomplish that, and what would be the profile of the ideal individual in terms of personal characteristics and attributes and values and so forth that would enable them to be successful. And then to go out and find that person is the biggest treasure hunt of all. We speak to over 100 people to come back with the top handful that we think are the fit, and we have enabled our families by using this process to successfully get the right person each time over the last 20 years. And the fun is when you see it come to pass and the family says, this is the right person. We're really able to accomplish what we're trying to do. Our families are going to be able to accomplish what we're trying to do. That's the pleasure, and that's the passion, and that's why I think the rest of it is a byproduct of loving what I do. It's exciting. It's very exciting. And then to hear there's a client of ours who, I can't say too much to reveal the identity, but when the client comes back and says, you made such a difference in our life. I've never seen my father happier than when this person came into our lives. We've never been happier. I mean, we owe it all to you, and they don't owe it to me. We were just the person who helped them find what they needed. But that's, you know, that's such their gratitude, and to see that it's successful is, we can't say who we work for. We're under non-disclosure agreements with everybody, but you go to sleep with a smile on your face that you know you really help them find the solution that's going to enable them to be successful.
How did the last 2 years impact your clients?
Many dimensions to that question. You know, again, this is family you're talking about. So I think that, first of all, when COVID hit, it forced everyone, nobody could go anywhere. So it forced everyone into a virtual environment to be able to communicate. And I think people were very resourceful and very resilient. I got off a plane on March 13th of 2020 from working with a family, was supposed to get on a plane 2 days later. That trip didn't happen. We immediately went on to Zoom. That was a East Coast to West Coast relocation at the end of the day. The whole thing was done on Zoom, and it was done on schedule. I think that it taught people that, you know, motherhood is necessity is the motherhood of invention. There was no choice. Nobody could go anywhere. As time evolved, you know, we had candidates go meet the families in person at the later stage of the search. And at the beginning, they were on opposite ends of a conference room, and then they got to get closer and closer together. I'd say the whole hybrid work environment now, though, it's a challenge for many families because they're used to in-person and they like in-person. You know, it's not just about doing your tax return. It's about sitting down and providing you advice and counsel on something you may be thinking through. That could be an investment opportunity. It could be a family situation. It could be something about your children. And those are very personal conversations. And I think a lot of people still want to have that human face-to-face interaction. Having said that, I think for the staff in the family office, the world is going to a hybrid model. And I think families are needing to be flexible and adaptable.
So in closing, what was the biggest challenge you had in the last 20 years? And how did you grow through that?
Well, I am going to thank you for a lot of that, because my biggest challenge was I started my firm. I subleased an office at somebody else's firm. I sat there with a non-compete with a blank computer screen and thought, how in the heck am I going to do this? And because of the path I was on, I was going up against the big global firms who had, you know, fancy marketing materials and, you know, all this pedigree and track record and so forth. And I couldn't even talk about my track record because that was part of my non-compete. Anyway, so as you remember, David, I think I had the will and I think I had the passion, but I wasn't sure how to go about doing it. And I came to Inspired Work. I was introduced to you, came to a couple sessions, and I think you gave me the confidence.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
I so appreciate that. And now I'm going to acknowledge you as a client. And I'm going to start with a little story about Stella Adler, the legendary theatrical teacher. One of my friends helped run her institute in New York in the last years of her life. And they were having dinner one night, and he asked her, who are your favorite students? Are they the unknown actors that you helped get successful and famous? And she blew a big cloud of smoke in the air and said, hell no, I prefer working with the rich and the famous. And he asked her why. And she said, because the rich and the famous hang on my every word. When I make a suggestion, they use it. And when it works, they send me a love note. The unknown fight me every step of the way. And so you had the kind of courage and inquisitive nature that even some of the more challenging things I suggested that you do, you went right out and did them. And you didn't have that contemptuous reaction that so many people use as a kind of outer shell to their fear. You've never had that. So I feel just as grateful, I think, as you that we found each other.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.